But why Scotland? So, you know, when I leave for Scotland, for me, this time, it isn't just about a trip. I went to Wales and I went to South Wales because I hadn't been to that part of Wales. I'd been to North Wales. I worked there years ago and I really wanted to explore some new places. And if you've seen any of my other videos, you'll see that actually when we do new things, we get that dopamine hit rather than doom scrolling. We get out there, explore nature. You know, it helps us feel calmer and more at peace and connect with our own intuition, and can just be really nice to have a few hours out. And travel does that, you know, for us. But why Scotland for me? So it's a journey back into my family story. So my mum was born in Scotland, and it's a place that has held sort of conflicting feelings over the years. A place full of secrets, heritage, resilience, and also pain. My mum was born there. She left the island. She lived on the Isle of Bute until she was about 14, 15, and then went to Glasgow and worked there until she met her partner and got married. And two of my brothers were born in Scotland, and the third one she was pregnant with when she came down to Manchester. And none of that was planned, and we've often shared stories about her journey and her trip and what was going on for her. But for years, I carried questions around identity, culture, race, class, all sorts of different questions I had for years. And it was only when I started, towards the end of my therapy training, especially when I did my master's, I was actually looking at that in a much deeper way. And it was questions that came to me as a result of my past experiences, but also when I met my then husband and had children. And that became more important to examine on a much deeper level. So Changing Spaces was also the name of my thesis, and the book related to that. But now it's about a living journey, about exploring Scotland, not just as a traveller, not as a tourist, but through the lens of ancestry, architecture, and resonance. And it's all those things that we think about when we think about culture. And what makes up a culture is usually a shared understanding of a group of people, shared beliefs, shared values to some degree, food, dress, but also the nuances of culture, and how that culture influenced us when we were growing up in Manchester. Because it's different when you don't grow up in the area that your parents are from, but you'll be heavily influenced by how they bring culture into your day-to-day family life through food, through mindset, through ideas and understanding. And I've not been to Scotland since I was about 11 years old when I went there and took the ferry over from Wimms Bay over to Rossi. My mum's from Rossi on the Isle of Bute, and visited my gran, who lived on the same street as Lena Savaroni, a few doors away from her. And I think Lena's family has still got an ice cream shop on the island. My uncle worked there for a number of years. He was a farmer, and then when he left Scotland, he came down and lived with us for a bit. And I was meant to go up and visit Scotland with him. In 2022, we were exploring that idea. He used to go up every year to visit, and for years he went up to see the Highland Games, and years ago he was in the Highland Games. He used to toss the cable, which is literally like a big tree trunk. So in 2022 we were looking at taking that trip, and sadly he passed just at the end, just before New Year's Eve. And so I've been thinking about it for a while, and then when I got my campervan and started to get confidence of driving around all different places, I thought it's now become really important for me to go back and visit and really connect with those spaces that my mum grew up in, and find out more, if I can, about ancestry, and also what that means to me, because what identity, culture, race and class and all that mean when you're a kid growing up. Sometimes we're aware of those things and sometimes we're not, or we might be aware of aspects of it. It really depends about the stories that have influenced you when you're growing up. You know, and all of us have some kind of history with those facets. We can't escape the fact, you know, that race, class, culture and gender interweave through our lives, and sometimes in a big way and sometimes in a subtle way. And so that's the trip. It'd be about listening to the land and the echoes of history and asking, how do these stories still live in us today? What are the stories that make up who we are, about who we are and who we think we are? And how has our conditioning influenced us? You know, how do we describe ourselves? And where did all these categories come from anyway, about how we describe our race, our identity? And identity is going through some very interesting, I'll use that word loosely, shifts at the moment. But really, if you look at the work of existentialists like Ernesto Spinelli, she talks about identity being fluid, and we can get very fixated on claiming language as ours and using words to try and describe our experiences. But really, we can be quite creative with the use of language and describing who we are, and how does that matter to us anyway. So when I was growing up, it was very difficult to, you know, when people say, who are you, where are you from, and how do you describe yourself? It was a common question, and it happened again when I got married and then when I had children. So there was always a conversation around that at different points in my life experience. So if you want to find out more, like and subscribe and follow me on this journey. I've no idea how it's going to unfold, but I'm going to be sharing some of that online. I've got a mixture of anxiety, excitement, fear, trepidation, especially going over on the ferry, because last time I went over on that, it was a very rough journey, and I suffered a lot from travel sickness when I was growing up, literally to the point I had to get off the buses and out of cars to throw up. And I couldn't take travel pills for all sorts of reasons. I'll share that on another video. So look out for the playlist on changing spaces through the lens. Like I said, through the lens has multiple meanings. But thanks for listening, and let me know what you think and what you enjoy about the videos and what you'd like to see more of.